All right, welcome back to Faith Family United Church of Christ Bible Study. We are studies in Luke, or study in Luke. We are currently in chapter 9:51. Chapter 9, verse 51. I just want to say before we get started that I want to say it's important, but what we're trying to do here today, what we're trying to do with this study is to make a commentary. We're going through and we're asking questions about the text that we're reading, and we're putting together the notes that we have. What does it mean for us today? What did it mean? I'm trying to help. What did it mean back then, and how we can apply that to our lives today? And we want to do a commentary off of what we talked about and everything. And so the more people that get involved and have an input into that, the more insightful the commentary will be. And so I'm encouraging people to, if you're watching, to write in and give us questions, or if you please come and join in the conversation. It's not like we're not like trying to teach you or tell you what the Bible says. We're trying to understand the Bible and apply it to our lives. Okay, so I just wanted to take a minute to do that.
Very good.
So we are in chapter 9, verse 51. And let's see, there we go. All right, so this is a Samaritan village refuses to receive Jesus. Do you have a heading on yours, Jackie? I know you have an NIV.
That's exactly what it says. A Samaritan village refuses to receive Jesus.
Okay.
Yep.
It's when the days drew near for him to be taken up, this is Jesus, set his face to go to Jerusalem. And he sent messengers ahead of him. On their way, they entered a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him. But they did not receive him, because his face was set towards Jerusalem. When his disciples James and John saw it, they said, "Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them?" But he turned and rebuked them. Then they went to another village. All right, so let's deal with that one. What's the first thing that jumps out at you?
His face set for Jerusalem?
His face set for Jerusalem. What does that mean?
That's where it's headed. That was on the agenda.
Okay. So it's like, okay, it's time to do this. And so he's heading towards Jerusalem. What about right before that? The comma right before that. The days drew near for him to be taken up.
Is that part of the crucifixion?
That's a good question. What does
I think it means arrested.
to be taken up? Okay. Remember earlier in one of the his proclaiming that he was going to be handed over to humans, handed over to the hands of humans, and this is kind of like another euphemism of what's going to happen. He's going to be taken up.
So where did they come up with the word receive? That's
We'll get to that. Hold on for a second. So, set his face on Jerusalem. In other words, he had his resolve. And this idea of being taken up. In another place in the New Testament, Jesus says, my life I lay down and I can take up my life and I can lay my life down. Mm-hmm. So it's like he's ready here to give his life over. And that's where he sets his face towards Jerusalem. What about that? What you got, Cindy?
It says pretty much the same thing.
Okay. So he's got his resolve. It's time. Days are getting close. I need to go to Jerusalem, and I'm be taken up. I'm going to give my life, I'm going to give myself into the hands of
Actually, it says when it came close to the time for his ascension here,
ascension, taken up.
he gathered up his courage and steeled himself for the journey to Jerusalem.
And steeled himself. That's pretty. Okay. What's the next thing we see here?
The Samaritans refused to take him in.
What about this? This was an enigma to me. In 52, start at 52. And he sent messengers ahead of him. Where did he send the messengers?
Had to be on somewhere in Jerusalem, wasn't it?
Is he sending them to Jerusalem?
That's what
Or
it's-
is he just sending them,
Out.
ahead of him to prepare the way? Obviously they had to make a stopover in Samaria, right? So did he send them to Jerusalem? Here's my question: if the answer is he went to Jerusalem, he sent them to Jerusalem, because note it says on their way they entered a village in Samaria. So in other words, they were going to Jerusalem, but on their way
It was nighttime.
they needed a place to stay, so they tried to prepare a place for him. And that seems to be what this is saying here. I think that it's saying that he sent the messengers to go ahead of him to Jerusalem. But, they couldn't make it in one day. And so they stop over in this Samaritan village on their way to Jerusalem. And what did they do? Well, they did what they were sent out to do, was to make it ready for him. Now, I think that it was also, they were supposed to go to Jerusalem and make Jerusalem ready for him. Remember when on the Passover, he sent the disciples into Jerusalem to prepare the upper room so that they could do the Last Supper together. And I think this is kind of hinting at that as well. Where were they sent? To Jerusalem or to just ahead of him? And they come to a village to make it ready for him.
Yeah, I think that's what they were doing.
What's that?
I think that's really what they were doing. He was just sending people ahead because he had a large group.
Okay. But the whole, you got to remember, the person writing this, Luke is writing this in retrospect. He's looking back across this. Jesus has already been crucified and everything when he's writing this. So he's saying, he's ready to go to Jerusalem now, and he sends his disciples ahead of him. And they got to Samaria. So yeah, I think so. He sent them ahead of him. And here's one good point that I'd like to make. If they were sent straight to Jerusalem, what were they going to do there? He's already told them that he was going to die. And what was their reply to that?
Who's the greatest? Who's going to take
Yeah,
over?
who's the greatest among us? Not, what are you going to Jerusalem? Why are you talking about being handed over to humans, into human hands? What? No, they start arguing about, who's the greatest. And then when they're rebuked, remember we said this, when they get rebuked by that, they turn and say, well, we saw this guy, kind of like deflecting their rebuke. We saw this guy casting out demons in your name, but he's not one of us, so we told him to stop. And Jesus said, anybody that is not against us is for us.
Why did these fellows think that all Jesus had to do was cast fire and lightning? What's that all about?
Exactly. That's a good question. Once again, we'll get to that in just a second, though. There was. So on their way, they come to Samaritan. They try to make it ready for him, but the Samaritans are not going to receive him. What does yours say? Does it say welcome?
The people would not receive him.
Receive him. Okay.
Let him come in the house
Well,
or the village.
what does yours say, Jackie?
He sent the messengers ahead on his way. He entered a village of Samaria to make ready for him, but they did not receive him because his face was
Said
toward
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
Okay.
So they denied
So
him.
here's something. Cindy, does yours say receive? I hope it doesn't.
Refused hospitality.
Refused
They came-
hospitality.
They came to the Samaritan village to make arrangements for his hospitality, but when the Samaritans learned that this was the destination of Jerusalem, they refused hospitality.
There you go. That's a good one. Let's see. Where am I at here? Where's it at? Oh, here it is. If you look in, I thought I wrote it down. Oh, there it is. 9:48. In 9:48, chapter 9, verse 48, an argument arose among them as to which one of them was the greatest. But Jesus was aware of their thoughts, took a little child and put him by his side, and said to them, "Whoever welcomes," guess what? That's the same word in Greek as this word that we're looking at here, receives. So
Receives.
so they did not welcome him, right?
Okay.
We can use welcome instead of receive him. And I like Cindy's translation. They showed no hospitality to him. So so this idea of receives, I don't like that word being used there. I think a better title for this story would be a Samaritan village refuses to welcome Jesus.
When it comes to hospitality, is there a ranking if a king or an important person comes through? But what if it's just people, a pilgrimage of people? How many people can these Samaritans or anyone else have overnight?
That's interesting. It's like today. It's just like today. People look at people and they value the rich and the
They judge.
Yeah, exactly.
But ours
They-
is more racial or ethnic. Either you look Chinese, you look black, or you look different. You look Mexican.
So is that a human nature or is that a worldly thing that's taught through society?
It's something they learn as children. It's a cultural thing.
But yet, if you watch children,
They couldn't care less.
that's right. You're a friend. You're a
That's
friend.
what they are.
You think about how dirt poor some of your friends were growing up, and then as you got older, you realized how they were poor, and they kind of faded away from the society picture and they went around with other poorer people. And you can say the same thing with racial. When I was a little boy, I played with anybody. Didn't matter what race, color your skin, who your dad was. I would go. It was funny because my dad was enlisted and I was in the military, and I would go on the other side of the lake where all the officers' kids,
Yeah.
and I would play with them, and that didn't make any difference to me. I did notice that, wow, your house is a lot bigger and nicer than our house. Living on a military base, rank has its privileges, but I didn't equate that with the person, and so I think it's taught to pick and choose who you want to welcome. And I think going back to what Jesus said about the little child, you're supposed to welcome everyone.
Mhm.
And I think that that was the next thing that I was going to say, Jackie. You kind of read through it. Why did they not welcome him? It says right there, because
He was going to Jerusalem.
he was going to Jerusalem. Now, does this make sense to you?
They were afraid that the Jews would find out they gave him hospitality and retaliate against them.
Was it they were afraid of the Jews?
The
Or-
Samaritans
Yeah.
or the Romans, whomever.
Or do you think that their animosity between the Jews and the
Well,
Samaritans?
that could be it too.
It's like would we welcome, you know, I'm going to say it, would a MAGA person, if they come through the door wearing their MAGA hat and
We
everything,
would.
would we welcome them?
We would.
We would, because that's what we're taught to do. You know, yeah, your ideology might be different, and everything, but we're talking about love and
But-
and everything.
If the
And so-
MAGA person was actively stoning us and,
That's not into the story.
no, but the
No, it's not.
Samaritans were treated
Yeah, they were
very
treated
poorly.
very poorly, and so they had that animosity,
51.
animosity between the Jews, and then this whole idea. You know, when Jesus talked to this Samaritan woman at the well, what did she say to him? She said, "You." I think that's
Why
coming
would
up
you
in
give
chapter
me
10.
ask for water? You know,
Well, he says, "You're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan. Why would you?" In other words, and then she goes on to say, "Well, you Jews say that we have to go to Jerusalem and worship at the temple, where we say we can worship." So there's that idea. Oh, you're going to Jerusalem. You're going there to worship. Yeah, we understand what you're doing. You're coming here and you're going to take our hospitality, and then you're going to leave and tell everybody how we don't worship right and everything. Isn't
But-
that what we do today?
But then,
Sure.
if you get down further, Jesus is like, you know, he understands why they feel that way, so let's not hold it against them. They have a reason to feel this way.
Yes. And I got another comment about that as well. And we'll talk about that in a second. So this whole idea of they didn't welcome him, it looks like they didn't welcome him because in their eyes, he's just a hypocrite. Oh, you're going to accept our hospitality up here on the mountains of Samaria, but you're going to Jerusalem, to where you guys think you have to go to worship. So he and like Cindy said, in a little bit we'll see that they understood this, and that he understood their feelings. Okay, so I put isn't it human nature to want to destroy one's enemies? And that is, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? Isn't that the way we are? Look at our political situation today. You're either right or you're left. And neither shall the two come together, right? The only way we're going to come together is if one becomes more powerful than the other and we let them come and be part of us, whether you're on the left or on the right.
otherwise we'll nuke them.
Well, exactly. If you don't agree with us, let's call down fire from heaven. And,
I thought it was just us.
but it seems to be human nature. I say human nature. I want to blame it on society. That's what the world talks about. I got to stop there because I'm going to get into my sermon. but I think the way the world is run now through the domination system, we don't have this ideology of accepting people's differences and finding a common ground. We always want to have the upper hand on them because you never know, they might come back and get us. And so here we are. This obviously 2,000 years ago they felt the same way. You know, that animosity between two groups of people, the Samaritans and the Jewish people. Comments?
I think
Okay,
you're
say
right about.
it.
I think you're right about the family, producing prejudice, biasness.
Oh yeah.
Because I lived in a very biased. There was no love. There was no love at all. Not until I got away from those people, and I met my people,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all they did was very loving. Let's meet someone. Oh God, let me introduce you to a friend. Let's all go together as friends. Instead of, I don't want that person in my house. They're black. Oh, I learned. I knew there was something wrong. I knew there was something wrong.
It's definitely a taught thing.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. But that's the way
you have
they
to be
were
carefully taught.
Yes.
But that's how they were raised, though.
And the the only way you get out of that is through educating people. The more you learn about the more you learn about something, the more you understand it, and the more accepting of it, because you see the humanity in it. For instance, I'm going to use the LGBTQ. Someone that knows nothing about the LGBTQ community, what is their response?
All faggots.
Love the sin or hate the sin. They
Yeah,
think it's a sin.
But the only reason you're gay is because you don't have any willpower to resist. It's about sex.
That's all gay people do.
So
It's
is that
not.
is that the only reason that straight people have?
Well,
the
that's what I'm
same
saying. But
relationship?
that's their perceptive,
Right.
Yeah.
because they don't know. They're not educated. They don't understand.
But their father told them this is how to hate them. Get
Exactly.
the shotgun out.
Their
It's
church,
you're
don't they?
different.
You're different.
You're different.
And we don't want anything to do with that.
Right. You're different in a way that I've been told is just ugh.
So
I shouldn't-
so instead of coming, and I always like to say, the horse's mouth. Go to the horse's mouth. Don't let someone else tell you about it. Go to the horse's mouth and let them tell you about it, right? So, why do those people do that? No, because now I might become gay because
You
Well,
can catch
that's
it.
like that letter
Jumps
that
on you.
we had published last week.
yes,
I hope you're having an uncomfortable Pride Month.
Mhm.
That woman felt that way about LGBTQ people until she actually met one and
exactly.
didn't realize she was meeting somebody. And then it morphed into, oh, now that I know,
Now that I
No,
know,
no, I
then
really
I
know.
understand, and
let me tell you.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. One last part here. Jesus rebukes them for this, wanting to call down. What do you think that says about how we should deal? What is our lesson taking from that?
Well, like I said,
John 3:17 says, this is John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son. Jesus did not come into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Wow. And I think that applies here. Go ahead, Cindy.
No, I was just going to say that he was understanding of the way they felt, the way they did, but also, we read previously a few weeks ago or whatever, that Jesus said, if the town doesn't accept you, stake your sandals and keep moving.
Exactly.
So if they don't want you there, keep moving.
Don't take it personal.
Until you find
Yeah.
people who are
Yeah.
going to listen.
Yes. And the very last words of this story is, he turned and then they went to another village.
Mhm.
They didn't stay there and argue with them about why they should be accepting Jesus and the difference between Jews, and they just said, okay, you're not ready to hear what we have to say, and they moved on. That speaks volumes of how we should conduct ourselves. Go ahead.
It's hard.
It's-
Human nature does
We
not.
can't do that. We can't do that this November.
Well,
Well,
I
that's
think
different.
we're talking
See, that-
about people. We're talking about issues. I think that's where the difference is, right? We see people and we associate with them with the issue, but the person in and of themselves is not the issue.
It's
I know it's hard to separate the two, but that's the difference, right? Is
I'm-
you have to speak up when you see injustice, and you have to speak up when you see, people being maligned and things like that. But I think in this instance, he was talking more specifically about people.
here. Let me give you a for instance
you
from
believe
my
that?
from my own
Experience.
experience. When I was going through a divorce with my ex-wife,
Mhm.
I was working at Johns Hopkins as a security guard.
Okay.
And I was going around and I just got myself a new apartment. I'd moved out from my wife. I got myself a new apartment. And this person that I always thought was my friend, and I always joked with her and everything. Well, I was joking with her, and I said to her, I said, yeah, now that I have a new place, maybe you could come over. And I was faking male misogyny, male chauvinism. And she looked at me and I said, oh, no, so you could clean my place for me, ha ha ha, joke. Yeah. Now, I like I said, I've known this person for a year or two, and I thought they were my friend. I mean, yeah, I only knew them from the word, but I thought they were my friend, and I thought they understood my sense of humor. And no, they immediately called my supervisor and said that I was her. She said that I was harassing her and that I keep asking her out on dates. And I was like, so what is my response to that?
That's the way she felt. Just leave her alone.
Ah, no, that wasn't my response, because I had that was not my intention. She really misunderstood my whole.
It doesn't matter.
My whole part in that situation. I was just, I'm doing my job, and I'm her friend, and I'm joking around with her, and I meant nothing by it. I was just. So I want to talk to her, and I want to tell her this, and I want to understand my point of view. But guess what?
They said no.
That would have only made the situation worse, because now I keep harassing her, trying to, So, fortunately, I had a good friend that another person that I worked with and she said, what's it he said? Leave her alone. Just don't,
Have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. So the next time I was on duty, I told the person that tells us which post you're supposed to be at. Of course, as a security guard, you walk around a lot of the hospital,
Right.
But you have different areas that you're supposed to.
Right.
And I just asked him not to put me in that area anymore.
Right.
Move to a different village, right? And so I think that's the point that you're making here, is they're not going to listen to you. If you stand up to them, they're not going to listen to you. All they're going to hear is, you think I'm wrong, and I'm going to prove you wrong. Right, you're wrong, and so you're just going to butt heads.
You're right, Cindy, because that's exactly what they tell us when we're canvassing. If you hit somebody like a MAGA person, just thank you and move on. We're going to talk to the people that are listening.
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's true.
You want, because obviously, if they're going to show resistance to you and you haven't really said anything, then they're not going to listen.
They're not going to listen. So don't waste your time.
Exactly. Okay, so moving on to the next one. We'll try to get the next one here in 1 minute. As they were going along the road, someone said to him, this is one person, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. What do you think that's saying? What is Jesus saying there?
He's saying, are you ready to choose a rough road? Like, we don't stay in nice places. We don't sleep in beds every night. We don't always have something to eat that you want to eat. It's a rough journey. Are you sure you want to do that?
Exactly. This person come to Jesus and said, I'll follow you. We have a lot of people that claim to be Christians. And, Jesus, you need Jesus in your life. And meanwhile, they're not doing anything that Jesus is teaching. Yeah. Let me ask this question. Where's Jesus going right now?
Jerusalem.
To Jerusalem.
To be crucified. And this person says, I'll follow you wherever you go. Can you imagine the little chuckle that Jesus has in the back of his head?
Right.
Oh,
right.
yeah. If you knew where I'm really going.
Let me tell you that.
Okay. So, so that's one person, and Jesus is saying, you know, you don't understand that this world is where I'm going. This world doesn't accept, right? And you're not going to have a place to live. You're not going to have. So you're going to be out of in vogue, if you want, or a social outcast if you follow me. You're not going to have a home. You're not going to have a place. So, okay. So that's that one. Number two. To another, he said, "Follow me." So the first one said he will follow Jesus. Now Jesus is inviting this person to follow him. And he said, "Lord, first let me go bury my father."
This is a very important. This statement by Jesus is speaking more to just this situation.
Right.
He says, your life, your belief, your business, your job is about life, not death. And so many Christians are focused on getting to heaven and dying. What happens if you die? If you died today, where are you going to go? Your family's going to be. Is your family going to be with you in heaven? That's their whole entire focus is on death. But Jesus is saying, no, your focus should be living.
Amen.
And loving.
That's a good way to point that out. Because what he says here, first let me go bury my father. Guess what? What's one of the 10 Commandments?
Honor your mother
and father, right? And he's honoring him. The social way of honoring your mother and father was to take care of them after their death. But Jesus is saying, like Cindy pointed out, that you're worried about the dead. I'm worried about the living. So let the dead bury their own dead. In other words, you go and proclaim the kingdom of God. That's what it says. Go and proclaim the kingdom of God. In other words, proclaim what's totally different from the way the world is run right now, through this domination, this power and control. You know, you'll never hear me not say that. Okay, the world is about domination. You know, I have power, I have control. I'm the winner, right?
Yeah,
You're going to die anyway.
Yeah, 2,000 years after this, the church is still focused on death.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They're not focused on making the world a better place, so that death isn't an angst. If you were living your life and loving and sharing and committed to making the world physically a better place and community a better place, then your death would not be something to fear because you've lived a good life. So it's like, that's the whole focus of the church is again right back here where Judaism, Pharisees Pharisees were then 2,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They're so focused on the death and not on the life.
There you go.
That's my sermon for today. But it's true.
Okay, so the next part is they have another person. This is a third person that comes up, and he says, "I will follow you, but
Again.
but here we go. But let me first say farewell to those in my house." And Jesus says to him, "No one puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom." Wow. So why would Jesus say that? Where's he going to go?
Jerusalem.
No, where's this person going to go?
Back home.
Back home. Now, think about that. If you, as a young person, go home and you tell your family, "Oh, I met this guy, and he's the Son of God, and I'm going to follow him wherever he goes, and he's going to teach me," they're going to go, "Oh, that's great. Wonderful. I'm glad you have found purpose in your life." Jesus knew that. His family's going to dissuade him from trying to do this. They're going to say, "No, you're not." Especially since what Jesus is teaching is so radical from what society and what the Jewish religion was about then.
I think too here, it's an excuse. People always say, "Oh, I can't come to church because I'm drinking or I'm doing things I shouldn't be doing. So let me get that straightened out, and then I'll come be a part. Once I get my life straight, I'll come to church." But Jesus is like, you need to be in community to live right and to get things straightened out.
Yeah.
Because that's just an excuse. People are like, "Oh, I want to come to church, but." Or I'll come to church when, or I'll do this when.
That's a good take on this. The fact that he wanted to go set things straight first,
Yeah.
and then come back. But Jesus says, you need to work in the kingdom. Once you start working in the kingdom, that stuff will settle itself, because you'll see that's not as important as doing the kingdom work.
Right.
And
Because
that is
once you join the kingdom work,
exactly.
then everything else falls into place.
My version says, Jesus said, no procrastination, no backward looks. You can't put God's kingdom off until tomorrow. Seize the day.
Yeah.
Oh, I like
Live
that.
in the
Yeah.
present.
That's
kind of what he said with the I'm going to take care of my father.
Yeah.
Once again, you're talking about the dead. You're talking about the past. We're talking about the now. What are you doing now? Okay. And that was the last comment that I had. Don't look back. Don't look back, because when you look back, you go, "Oh yeah, I remember."
The past is a trap.
And
right, and then you get caught up in it.
Any other questions about these two stories?
There won't
Very
be
interesting.
any next week. You're not
No,
gonna be here?
we're not going to be here next week, so I'm not going to be here next week.
You're not?
No, I'm not.
Oh, that's
Mike is going to be
why you're here today.
leaving.
I got it. Okay.
Where are you headed to this time?
Just staycation.
That's
You're not gonna tell
the
us?
5th Sunday, right?
Yeah. This is the 5th Sunday, but I'm going to go because this is the last sermon in the series, the I Am series.
Got it.
Okay, so we will see you in 2 weeks.